So it's been a long time since I've done an Arc build for Titan, and with the release of Arc 3.0 out for all the classes, I was most intrigued by the changes to Titan, and this is coming from a Warlock main. And after running Titan for a couple of weeks, I feel confident saying it's easily the strongest out of the classes for Arc 3.0. Between the insane movement tech, powerful aspects, and ability to regen health and become easily amplified, it's no wonder you're seeing a lot more Titans in the Crucible. So today I'm going to cover the aspects, fragments, stats, and exotics you should be using to slay out in the Crucible. So whether you're wondering where to start for Arc 3.0 on Titan, or just looking to optimize your current build, I think you'll find this video helpful. Now let's get into the video, and if you find this helpful, don't forget to drop a like as it helps support the channel. Getting into our Arc 3.0 build for Titan, and we have to start with our super, and here we are going with Thunder Crash. And the reason for that is two reasons. The first being the cooldown in comparison to Fists of Havoc, so 916 versus 820. But also the overall utility of Thunder Crash. The ability to shut down basically any super is incredibly valuable, and also with that lower base cooldown, it's going to allow us in modes like trials to get our super first, which can allow you to pop your super first, of course, and then also win rounds early and hopefully prevent your enemy from getting their super as well. But of course, like I said, shut down many other supers, and just the threat of having a Thunder Crash in another team, once you see they have their super, really causes the enemy team to hold their super because they're trying to see if they can bait out the Thunder Crash, or they don't want to pop their super because they know with Thunder Crash, one, you're very hard to kill because it's a shutdown super, but you're also very mobile in it. But it's also very hard to avoid when someone pops that Thunder Crash. And so it just has incredible utility for just shutting out any super in the game. And because of that lower base cooldown, a lot of times you're going to be the first one to get it. For our abilities, we have some new options here. So we have the old ones, Towering Barricade, Rally Barricade, and now the new one, which is Thruster. Here, I'm still going to recommend Towering Barricade just because of the overall utility, the ability to create your own cover and essentially play that cover to win a lot of 1v2, 1v3 type scenarios. It's just incredibly useful for locking down a point, to blocking off a corridor. There's just so much you can do with this. The new hip one is Thruster, which is also very good in my opinion, but it just really depends on your playstyle. This allows you to be incredibly mobile, especially when you compare it with combine it with something like Shoulder Charge, which we'll talk about in a second. But it is great for just getting around the map, creating some misdirection in some of those close quarter fights. So there's definitely some mastery and utility to Thruster, but I think overall, Towering Barricade is just going to be useful in more situations, and it's going to allow you to take on those 1v2, 2v, 1v3 scenarios, which is Thruster is going to be more about just getting out of those scenarios altogether. So still a great option. Not going to hold it against anyone that wants to choose that, but for me, I'm going to be choosing Towering Barricade. For our jumps or movement, we have Strafe Lift, High Lift, and Catapult. I go with Strafe Lift because similar to Warlock, this is going to give you the most controlled burst of movement to allow you kind of build momentum and stay very close to the ground. So this is going to keep you from feeling too floaty and too out of control. And so this is why I chose Strafe Lift. For our melee, we have a couple options. We have Seismic Strike or Shoulder Charge. You have Ballistic Slam and Thunderclap. Thunderclap being the newest of the abilities, and Thunderclap right out the gate, I'm just gonna say I don't really recommend it. It does have, it is incredibly powerful, but it is very easy to predict. The charge up time is super long. You're stationary, and again from the sound cues, like you can predict it quite easily. Ballistic Slam is a great melee ability, and I've seen some people use this quite well. I tend to find this is a little bit better in the 3v3 type scenarios. In control or 6v6, I find this to be not very useful, or not quite as useful. You can get some really cool like montage moments, but overall it's going to put you in a lot more harm, or do a lot more harm to you, because you're just flying into the enemy team, and a lot of times you may get 1 or 2 kills, but a lot of times you will end up dying from this. So Ballistic Slam does have some utility, but overall you're going to be putting yourself in harm's way a lot more often with this ability. Shoulder Charge is going to be the one I'm going to recommend here because of the ability to do a couple of things. One, it's going to increase your overall movement around the map, so you're gonna be able to get around the map a little bit quicker, or get out of bad spots a little bit quicker. And this can also be used to create misdirection. A lot of people like to kind of fly in on an enemy, get them turned around, and then shoulder charge in the opposite direction, just again to create that misdirection. But also from just a potency standpoint and ability to do damage, there is a great combo you can kind of do where you kind of slide in shotgun and then shoulder charge all at once, which is quite potent and can give you a really quick kill. And as long as you're hitting some of those pellets, a lot of times this is going to do some damage. This also now blinds enemies around them, so it can just be incredibly disorienting and hard to counter when you get hit with this shoulder charge. So just a lot of utility, so many different things you can do with shoulder charge, and I think the biggest thing for me on this is, again, that increased movement speed and ability to just kind of zoom around the map. Going from Titan and then playing back on my Warlock without this was very noticeable, so I did miss having my shoulder charge once I switched back to my Warlock. Getting into our grenade, we have a couple of options here. In the past, I've often recommended Pulse Grenade because its ability to destroy Titan barricades, to destroy Warlock rifts and just block off corridors, all that kind of good stuff. But for this build, we're actually going to be going with the Storm Grenade, and this is where it brings down that lightning and stuff like that. And by itself, it is okay. It's not nearly as good as it used to be before Arc 3.0 revamp came out, but we're going to jump right into our aspect, which is Touch of Thunder, because I can't really talk about why you should choose a Storm Grenade without talking about the aspect Touch of Thunder, where essentially your Flashbang, Pulse, Lightning, and Storm Grenades have enhanced functionality. And essentially, you can kind of see here the different things it does for different grenades, but we're going to be focused on Storm Grenade. So after detonating, creates a roaming thunder cloud that tracks nearby targets and fires bolts of lightnings at foes beneath it. And so essentially, with Touch of Thunder aspect, you'll have your initial burst from the Storm Grenade per normal, but then it'll continue to kind of shoot down those lightning bolts and fire and follow around your enemy. And so the utility of this is actually insane, and I think it's a little too strong in my opinion, but this absolutely destroys Titan barricades, Warlock rifts. Warlocks in a rift cannot heal through this. It's great for throwing it in anticipation of a corridor an enemy could be going through, because it's going to follow them around. And so there's just so much you can do with a grenade that literally kind of does the work for you. And that's the one thing I caution about this with this aspect, though, is sometimes because you get so reliant on it just following people around that your initial accuracy of your grenade throw can kind of go out the window. Don't underestimate the importance of having that initial accuracy, because if you do, it's just going to make the grenade have to travel a little bit farther. It can be avoided. It doesn't follow super quick, but it does last quite a while, it seems, and it will continue to just do a fair amount of damage. So a lot of people will think they've avoided it, and it's still following them and ends up still getting you the kill. And so with this Touch of Thunder arc aspect, you will find yourself getting just a lot of free kills. It's actually just ridiculous, and it's just a great counter. It forces the enemy team to move, and they have to account for it, because if they stay still, it will end up killing them. So Touch of Thunder, if you're going to sacrifice any aspect here, Touch of Thunder has to be the one you choose, because just with that Storm Grenade, it is just so powerful in PvP. For our other aspect, I'm going to recommend it's going to be Knockout, where critically wounding a target or breaking their shield infuses your melee attacks with arc energy, increases your melee range and damage for a short time. And then defeating targets with melee attack starts health regen and makes you amplified. So this is incredibly powerful aspect just for your close quarters fights, and it's going to just make you very potent in those situations, because of the fact that, especially if you're using something like a shotgun or SMG, the second you break their shield, it's going to make your melee that much stronger and increase the range of it. So it's very easy to land those melees, and it's going to make your melee feel a lot more consistent. And then on top of that, when you get those melee kills, which you inevitably will, it's going to generate health regen, which also goes great with shoulder charge, because you can fly in, shoot your shotgun, slide, shoot your shotgun, and then shoulder charge. And once you secure that kill, you immediately get that health regen. And then from there, you can kind of go on a nice killing spree from there. So Knockout is great for allowing you to take on multiple enemies at once. And then you can see how this would pair really well, not with just shoulder charge, but with the towering barricade. Because a lot of times if enemies are pushing you on the towering barricade, or while you're playing your barricade, you're going to be in that close quarter fight right there. And so it's going to just allow you to challenge multiple enemies at once, because as long as you're getting that first melee kill, that's really what can start the chain effect, because you're going to get that health regen and then be able to kill multiple enemies after that, because a lot of times they're not anticipating you getting that health regen. Our last option here is Juggernaut. And this is something that you're seeing a little bit more right now, because it creates that shield while you're sprinting. But overall, I'm not a big fan of this. I think it forces you to play a little bit too predictably because you're just sprinting right at people, and so you might get a kill here or there, but I think once your enemy kind of assesses how you're playing, they're going to be able to easily counter your play and just kind of poke at you and to get rid of that shield initially. And so I think the fact that you would have to sacrifice Touch of Thunder or Knockout, which are both such good aspects in their own respects, I can't recommend Juggernaut over either of these two. Again, at the end of the day, choose what you would like, but I think you're leaving a lot of potential on the table if you don't run Touch of Thunder and Knockout. For our fragments, the first one I'm going to recommend is Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage, and it gives you plus 10 strength. And so what I have found just from partnering with different people is it gives you about 10% damage resistance in PvP, which is going to be great because a lot of our abilities, talking about shoulder charge and knockout, we're probably going to be in close proximity to a lot of different enemies at once. And so having Spark of Resistance active in combination with that health regen from knockout is just going to really help with our survivability and hopefully give us that just little bit of damage resistance we need to survive some fights and hopefully come out on top. Next, we have Spark of Recharge. While critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy regenerates more quickly. So again, this gives you a nice little boost when we get hurt to get our melee and grenade energy back, which is gonna be great for getting those super powerful storm grenades that are enhanced by Touch of Thunder back a little bit quicker, especially as, again, we're probably gonna be critically wounded a lot because of the Titan. A lot of times you're gonna be flying in, trying to utilize knockout, utilize your shoulder charge. So we're able to be a little bit more aggressive using Striker Titan, and so having this is going to be helpful to just help with that overall ability regen. Next, we have Spark of Magnitude. So your lingering arc grenades, lightning grenade, pulse grenade, and storm grenade have extended duration. This is pretty self-explanatory. Again, we have talked a lot about the potency of the storm grenade with Touch of Thunder, and this is going to just allow that grenade to last even longer because that's, you know, what it needs, I guess. So it just makes it that much more powerful, gives it that much more utility, and forces your enemy to kind of keep moving off their spot, which just gives us a huge advantage as we're kind of tracking them and pushing them into a bad spot. Lastly, we have Spark of Feedback. Taking melee damage briefly increases your outgoing melee damage and gives us an additional 10 resilience. And again, that 10 resilience is going to be nice for helping our class ability regen or our Towering Barricade in this instance. And so this is great because, again, it's just going to make our knockout and our overall melees that much more powerful. Second, someone melees us immediately, they're going to trigger Spark of Feedback, which is going to just ensure that our melees are doing as much damage as possible. So assuming we haven't already broken their shield and triggered knockout, this is going to ensure that that initial melee before knockout is triggered is as powerful as possible. And this increases your melee damage from 100 to 160. So the additional 60 can be the difference maker in a lot of those close quarter fights. And so a lot of this, as you can see, really kind of is very synergistic with our storm grenade and our melee attacks between knockout and shoulder charge. All these fragments really work really well with all of our abilities we've chosen thus far, and so it just makes this Art 3.0 for Striker just so potent, as you can see. And so with that, we're going to jump now into some of our stats and armor to really tie this all together. Getting into our stats, as I've talked about with any build I've ever done, the first thing we want to make sure is we're getting to that tier 10 or 100 recovery. So it's making sure that as you're deciding which stats you want to prioritize, that you're getting that recovery as high as possible. Next, after that, I would say what I would really recommend focusing on is either resilience or discipline. Resilience, you don't have to get all the way to tier 6. I think getting to at least tier 5 is going to give you a nice 33-second cooldown for your Towering Barricade, which is a pretty balanced approach, I would think, depending on, but if you can get this up to 100 without destroying your other stats, more power to you. I wish I get my resilience honestly a little bit higher because I think having your Towering Barricade so often is just incredibly potent and incredibly annoying to play against. And then from there, I would go discipline, because as we talked about, we want to be getting our storm grenade back as much as possible just because of how powerful it is. The fact that it's just literally chasing your enemy all over the place. This is definitely something I would recommend investing in. Intellect we don't need to go too crazy with because we already have that incredibly low base cooldown from Thunder Crash, and so as you can see, I'm sitting here at tier 5, and that already puts my super ability at 731. The highest I would probably go is, as you can see, to tier 6, where you get a nice decrease of 20 seconds all the way down to 7 minutes and 10 seconds. But based on the armor I have currently in my Titan, I wasn't able to quite get there, so that's gonna be where I land. But if you can get tier 6, that is what I would recommend. And then we do have our strength as well. You don't have to go, again, quite as high as tier 7, just where I've landed based on my armor, but I would recommend getting at least to that around 1 minute cooldown, so that way you have knockout able to be procced as much as possible. But overall, biggest thing is going to be probably recovery, resilience, and discipline as your main priorities for this build, and then from there you can kind of go between strength and intellect. Overall mobility, as I've also discussed in the past, don't find a lot of value in it, especially as you see when we talk about our exotic a little bit. But mobility is not something that I find super important. So again, overall, recovery being the #1 thing, and then you can kind of go from there between resilience and discipline and kind of see what's left. But from there, we're gonna kind of just dive into our armor. And for our armor, the biggest thing is just running targeting and mods that really help with the overall weapons that you're using. So I primarily use hand cannons and shotguns, sometimes slug shotguns as well. So like here, I have a submachine gun targeting on, but I would probably swap that out for like hand cannon targeting and shotgun targeting. Or sometimes I run double shotgun targeting if I'm using a slug and I just really want to amp up that aim assist. And then from here, I'm going to use hand cannon loader with fastball. Fastball helps make my grenades throwing a little bit more accurate. And then here you see I have unflinching hand cannon aim and unflinching shotgun aim, again just to make sure my weapons are performing as consistently as possible. And then you have our exotic, and the one I recommend here is going to be Dune Marchers. So you're going to be able to sprint faster and chain melee damage, and so this is just so perfect for the overall build, especially when you're flying in and getting those melee kills. This is going to be really helpful for getting or winning some of those 1v2, 1v3 scenarios, because you're gonna be chaining a ton of damage to the enemies around you. And so this just pairs perfectly with between shoulder charge and knockout. I feel like Dune Marchers is literally made for this Arc 3.0 build. Of course, it can be used with any Titan subclass, but feels especially perfect for the one we're talking about today. And then I also am running, as you can see, Radiant Light. This gives me additional just free 20 strength. I find no reason to not use this. And then I use hand cannon holster to make sure my hand cannon is being reloaded. But I usually would honestly probably run shotgun holster if I had the slots for it, but as it turns out, I don't on my Dune Marchers. Another great option here would also be something like One-Eyed Mask, but I find for the way I play and just the overall synergy you get with Dune Marchers and the rest of our Arc 3.0 build, that it just makes the most sense to run Dune Marchers. And I also love the faster sprinting, the ability to just slide in and get around the map very quickly, especially when combined with shoulder charge. And then lastly, as you can see, we have a quick charge on our class item, and this is going to just greatly increase the ready speed of fusion rifle, shotgun, submachine gun, and swords. Highly recommend using this. It just makes the responsiveness of your weapons feel so much better. And getting into our weapons, that's where you can see I typically am running a couple of things. I'm usually running some type of 140 hand cannon or a 120. So my go-to 120s as of late have been Sturm in my kinetic slot, because obviously look at the overall stats, especially when you have the catalyst, you just get insane range, great handling, which is great for swapping between your 120 and shotguns. And this is just really good right now. I feel like 120s overall are really good right now for countering pulses and scouts, which you're seeing a lot currently in the meta. And then I also am using Igneous Hammer if you have one, but of course, if you're using a 140, Austringer is really good. I actually found Thorn to be quite good depending on the map. Because you just get those little ticks of damage and allows you to play really, really aggressive. And because of the high handling, quickly swap between your shotgun. And for my shotgun, the one I've been really enjoying lately has been my Without Remorse. And it's all crafted. You can see how I crafted it here. Originally, I crafted it not with hipfire grip, but I switched to this based on a recommendation from my friend Nico. And I've actually enjoyed it a lot with hipfire grip. especially when you're sliding in and not always having the ADS, but still have that a very similar amount of accuracy. For our heavy, again, doesn't really matter. You can run Gallahorn if you're not already running an exotic. But overall, these are the weapons I would recommend. You could also really use like Out of Bounds, which is very popular right now and has arc damage, so I'll help you get amplified also. But typically I prefer the hand cannon shotgun combo per always. And again, like I said, the heavy, not really that important. As you can see, the overall potency of this build is great for any level of PvP. And with Arc 3.0 on Titan, you're getting a great combination of mobility and lethality that is currently unmatched by any other class. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out my Arc 3.0 build for Warlock at the top, or my video on how to improve your aim in Destiny 2 at the bottom.